Hello, everybody. I'm Raina from Garden District Bookshop, and welcome to Virtual Happy Hour. I'm going to be joined tonight by a return guest, which I'm very excited about. Alys Arden is here with me tonight, and she is the author of the Casquette Girls series. There's 4 books in this series now. The latest one, The Gates of Guinea, just came out a week ago. And yeah, we're going to talk books and all kinds of other stuff. So I'm going to just click the button and invite her into the screen. Hi.
Hi, guys.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. I'm coming to you from the most boring room in the French Quarter, but I'm very close to the router, and that was my priority.
Yes, for virtual events, sometimes you just have to make concessions with just what's the best internet in the house.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of people think they were in the best room and then just started walking around with their laptops through their houses, and you're just getting a virtual tour of everything going on behind them as they just find the best spot in their house. Yeah. I want to thank you specifically for coming back to Virtual Happy Hour with me. When you were on, I believe in June, which was kind of early on, I had a lot of tech issues and it was just disappearing.
No problem.
And after that, and you did amazing. I've gone back and watched that, and I was like, thank God it was Alys. I was just she just carried that, just kept right on going. I'm like, yes, thank you so much. But
it's all very New Orleans to me.
Just keep going. As long as the screen's moving, you just keep talking and see how this goes. Yeah. She'll be back eventually, probably. Who knows? It's a party. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you're the last book in the series, and this is the last book, right?
No, there's been one more. It was only very recently announced, so you haven't missed anything. The only thing that's public is that the title is going to be called The Immortal Saint Germain. It is the last book.
Okay.
However.
All right. So here's the question. How did that happen? Did you originally have 4 books planned? Did you originally have 5 books planned? And what happened? Tell me.
I feel like there was originally no plan, which is why it has changed with every book. It is not. One thing I can definitely say, it is not a matter of I'm adding to the story, or I don't want it to end, so I keep adding stuff. It's more like the story is not fitting into the original number of books, so it's kind of the choice, especially with this one, was the book was either going to be very long and very rushed, and it felt like it was losing its Southern Gothic pace, and I was like, no. We'll just have a 5th book.
You see me looking at them, I was like, it's a little, the newest one is a little bit shorter.
I think it's about 30 pages shorter than the first book.
Yeah, so you can't add too much onto that without it becoming just epically long at some point.
Exactly. The 3rd book was definitely as long as you can push it, as much as the text could be shrunk, and all of that.
All of a sudden, people are asking for the large print version, and the large print is just the normal text size because it's so tiny. Okay, no, this is
Don't
good.
Be scared.
No.
Don't be scared.
It's perfectly typeset. It's wonderful. You can just read it, no problem. I can hold it far away. Without my glasses, it's fine. And I wanted to say, everybody who's watching, if you have any comments or questions for Alys or for me or anything, just type it in the chat. We love to answer all of your questions, book related, New Orleans related, whatever you got. Throw it at us.
Yeah, this can be a discussion. You're part of it.
Exactly. So, okay, so you have a 5th book. Do you know when the 5th book is coming out? I mean, not we've even gotten through the whole last
My
bit.
readers are gonna love you already. Tentatively slated for next year. So I'm definitely hoping to stick to that.
Now, if I remember correctly, did this book get pushed back a little bit? Am I?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I mean,
Was that
COVID pushed things.
Yeah.
Yeah, more or less at the end of the day. I mean, it was a combination between that and the kind of making the decision about the 5th book, and then I rewrote the 4th book, knowing that there would be a 5th one, and just let it breathe a little bit.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that would change a lot of stuff. If you were thinking you had to pack everything into this last book, and then all of a sudden you were given 350 more pages or something.
Exactly.
Okay, we can just kind of let this breathe a little bit.
Exactly. And so this isn't really a spoiler because it's in the title, but the 4th book takes a little bit of a turn, kind of in the fifth 5-book arc. The 4th book, I feel like, is where it can like veer off and do something crazy. So the series, for anyone who doesn't know anything about it, is an urban fantasy. It's very New Orleans. Most of the book takes place in the French Quarter. And it's about different French Quarter urban legends. And so in the 4th book, they go to the afterworld, which is the only time they ever like step outside of that like kind of pure urban fantasy world and like a bit more portal fantasy, I guess. They're just a little bit more fantastical, although it's a lot more fantastical in a very urban fantasy way. But this part of the book to me in the series is so special and so unique and so just kind of like insane that it being squished, in order to end the series, it just was so upsetting, because the last thing I feel like any author ever wants is like, oh my God, it was so good until the last book and then everything was rushed. So this just it's not like I added a ton. It allowed me to add exactly what I needed in order for the afterworld to really like have its moment, and for the pacing to be, it's very fast as is, but it still to me feels Southern Gothic versus feeling very fast paced and now feeling like an action adventure book, or something like that. Yeah. So I think it all worked out. I hope other people do too.
Let's see, we have a question. Marina asks, how do you choose the point of view to write from for each scene? Like, especially scenes where with all the main characters.
So for anyone new, I definitely always try not to give any spoilers away. Not that this is a spoiler question, but so the first book is primarily from one antagonist point of view. There is a historical plot line in most of the books. So there is a secondary narrator in the first book, but it's very simple. Like the contemporary plot line is all one narrator. The historical plot line is all the second narrator. And I never actually had planned to add any other POVs. And what happened was, trying to see if I can say this without spoiler. So in book 2, this is not spoilery. So book 3 ties together 3 vampire urban legends from the French Quarter and kind of asks what if they were all connected to each other over 3 centuries. The second book takes 2 ghost story urban legends from the French Quarter. And my protagonist, Adele, can't see ghosts. So I was like, this is problematic because this whole book is about these 2 main ghost stories, and this is very important to the book. So I might have to have another narrator. Then the funny part, book 4 gets a new narrator, an additional narrator. And the irony is, I'm really glad that it happened the way it happened because Desiree is like a favorite character for readers, but that's definitely not why I did it. and I realize I haven't answered your question yet, Marina, but I will. This is more of like how I added narrators to the series. So I knew, okay, can I say this without spoilers? I knew there would be a scene at the end of the book that neither Adele nor Isaac would be able to narrate, because Adele would be off and Isaac would be the person who has to interrupt the scene, so he couldn't be the narrator of the scene. So I was like, I guess Blizzard is getting her own POV because I don't know how else this is gonna work. The irony is, that scene is at the very end, and when I got to that scene, it was a traumatic scene, and I was like, I can't write this from her POV. It's too traumatic. Like, I don't want to see that. I don't think anyone wants to see that. And so I ended up writing it from Isaac's POV anyway. But now I had written like a quarter of the book in B's POV, and I think the plot developed in ways that made sense because I had her POV. So I was glad that I had originally had put that like boundary on myself, came up with a solution that I needed Desiree's POV, put it in, even though at the end of the day, I didn't even need that. Now, granted, at the time, and I thought this would go all the way to the end, there is a scene likely that will now be at the end of book 5 that I know, again, I will need her POV for. So now it will be good because it's already in there. But to answer your question, I choose based on whoever is going to have the most emotional impact. So it's either, it's kind of like two-pronged. One, it's like, who is carrying this plot line? And then it's typically that whatever the answer is to that question. But then sometimes it's like, well, there's multiple plot lines in this chapter, which is often. So then you're kind of having like a secondary question of, oh, our first spam troll.
Right?
So secondary question is, whose POV will cause the most conflict, or who will be most emotionally impacted, and then that is who, how I choose. And there has been many times where I have written something in Isaac's POV, and then I'm like, nope, this needs to be an Adele's POV, and then I write an Adele's POV, and then I'm like, nope, was right the first time, I'm gonna be an Isaac's POV. More times than I care to admit.
I find that a lot of writing things is on the fly more than people think. Like it's a trial and error type of situation. Because yes, sometimes you write it and you're like, no, that's not working. That is not, how do I change it up? But then when you choose to add in, like change the point of view, you also set the tone for later, like you were saying, when now that door's been opened. So like going back or switching over to those other points of view is easier down the road later in the book, the same book or the next book.
Yeah, I'm like, now I have options.
Right.
Although I can definitely tell you there will be no more POVs added. Like 4 is enough. And it's been like 4 and change. If you think about one of the historical POV in book 3. Well, I guess also the historical POV in book 1. Okay. I never really realized.
They're just adding them up now.
Yeah.
Those are like almost the historical ones are they only half count. Because like they're not right. They don't stick with you the whole time through everything and come back. They're just like a one-off. Okay, that's fun. So Mandy is asking for a pronunciation guide for some of the LWA.
Aloha. I can do that. I am not going to do that now, but I can do that. We have a reader group on Facebook called The Attic. I can definitely do that in the reader group. No problem.
So, can we all join the reader group? How do we join the reader group?
all you have to do, the link, I believe, is like Alys Arden Attic. Wait, I have it right here. I can put it in the chat.
Let's see. I'm looking it up right now to see what
I will send it to you in the private chat.
Okay, yes. You do that, and then I will post it in the regular chat for everyone. If you ever did it as like a video or an Instagram, something that we could share on our page too, like you could tag us for sure, or I'd point them toward them. Let me know if you ever do that, and I'll definitely point people toward it as well.
No problem.
In the
future. It's a funny thing. When they did the first 2 audiobooks, they create a pronunciation guide, and the pronunciation guide is like 500 lines in a Excel spreadsheet that the producer made. And that's predominantly just New Orleans words. It's not even like, oh, that obscure voodoo stuff or French or whatever.
That's hilarious. But you've got to get those things right.
I mean,
especially in a place like New Orleans, because as soon as you mispronounce them, they go, oh, no. They don't know.
And Adele lives on Burgundy. So there's one like right off the bat.
Yep. You got to know. And your books, so a lot of times people will come into the store and they ask for, fiction set in New Orleans and, something that really is definitely the city, and your books are one of my go-tos because it does such a great job of putting us in the city. And I mean, and yes, there's paranormal. Yes, there's, witchy stuff. Yes, there's voodoo stuff. Yes, all of that is all true. And yes, there's, if you don't like fantasy, people are like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, look. Just trust me. It's going to do exactly what you just asked me for. You asked me for a book that will put you into New Orleans, and your books do that. By the time you get to, anything paranormal, you're going to be so far into the story, it's going to be fine. You're not even going to, you're going to be in. Like, I might be turning people on to, like, paranormal YA. I don't know what happens at the end of their journey through your books. They take them, and I don't find out.
I know. You have an existential crisis.
Right? You got more than you bargained for, but I promise you that you'll be transported into New Orleans, and that was what you asked for.
Well, when just book 1 was out, and I was very uncomfortable still just talking about the books, and still just even kind of shocked that the book existed. Right. And when people would we be doing stuff like this, or just when random people, not even necessarily like this, but like out at a thing, or something, and having to have like small talk, and people like, what are your books about? I would literally just be like, New Orleans.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty accurate. And the other thing too is like New Orleans is such a unique and interesting and just place that there are characters. These people are real. Like, there's another thing that, like, sometimes when there's voodoo stuff, when there's Wicca, when there's just eccentric characters in general, and people, especially, tourists, people that aren't from here, they go, okay, well, this is embellished. This is whatever. And I go, no, that's kind of what makes New Orleans awesome, is that we have all of this happening. And yes, there's some like more, magic-y, paranormal extremes, in your books, but like, no, this is real, and it's amazing and wonderful, and that's why I love it. So, and then like even explaining the Casquette Girls and the legend history of the actual Casquette Girls. And then I want to ask you, what are the Gates of Guinée?
So, as I started to say earlier, so it's all about like our city's urban legends, which are all tied into history, either because of the urban legends or like I tied them into history. So the first book covers the three vampire. I would say that the series is a witch series. Like if I had to put one word, and the first book covers the vampire urban legends. The second book covers two ghost urban legends. The third book, The Cities of Dead, with the Ferris wheel on the cover, it starts to tap into one of the city's voodoo urban legends, but it's also very much about the city's cemeteries. So you get a pretty vivid tour of some of our most infamous cemeteries. And the fourth book is actually Lafayette. So it's one of the only uptown scenes, so right around the corner from Garden District. And then so the fourth book goes full tilt into that voodoo urban legend, which says that, I'm not going to give too much away, but it essentially says that the gates to the afterworld are in New Orleans. So that's all I'll tell you. But that is the title of the book. So each title of the book is an urban legend. So The Romeo Catchers, which is the second book, is one of the ghost urban legends in the French Quarter. So the titles always give you a clue to something that's going to be in that book if you're paying attention.
When I originally Googled the title of your newest book, I got an Atlas Obscura article. Mm-hmm. I'm going to post. I'll post it here so you guys can read it too. But like that was, you know, sometimes you just type in the title and then sometimes you need like the title and the author. I just typed in the title and I was like, this is kind of what I was looking for. And now I've gone down this rabbit hole. Like now, where am I? So, yeah.
Well, and I think that that's why there's such a fervent like conspiracy theory culture in this reader group. That I think is one of the reasons that people like reading the books and they like meeting other people who are reading the books, and why we have this reader group, because everyone likes to compare their conspiracy theories about what's happening.
Right. And it's I mean, it's part conspiracy theory, but it's also like, I learned stuff. Like you learn, not only are you transported to the city, but like you say, you're exposing us to all these urban legends, and then these just like, do these gates exist or do they not? Like, are there physical ironwork gates of these things? Like history elements with the Casquette Girls, all this stuff. And it's like, when you get done, I'm completely entertained, but I also have like 15 things written on a notepad to research. Like, what is this?
Did you make that up or is that real?
No, that's real. Okay, so I have a thing, like when I'm reading books, I usually don't research while I'm reading them because I don't want something.
I think it's a good idea. Yeah.
I don't want something I find to counteract, especially if it's fiction, like where you built it into your world. But then once I get done, I'm like, okay, Gates of Guinea. Okay, like like I really do have, and sometimes I'll write, sometimes with fiction and historical fiction and stuff and other things that are set in real locations, and there will be people too. People or places. Like, is that a real place? Like, I don't know that. Is that person is sort of a side character, and that name sounds like, is that a made up name? Like, I'll write down names of characters and stuff too and find out, oh wait, that's based on a real person. Okay, that's cool. And now I'm off down that rabbit hole over here. So,
I think most of the places are, there's a lot of places in the book that used to exist that closed after Katrina. So they're kind of like playing homage a little bit to those. Obviously, there's lots of familiar sites and ones that are kind of inspired by things in real life. I think that is the most frequent piece of commentary that I get is, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I feel, because there's vampires in your book, but I feel like they could be real. Like the book, not the vampires, but like I feel like they could be real. And I do think a part of that, it happens because there's so much history in the books. So it adds a strong sense of realism. So if you had told me before I started that I was going to write an alternative Medicean history, I would have been like, are you nuts? But that's the way that it happened. So it's funny that you bring that up, because there's a series on Netflix, so like a relatively new series on Netflix about the Medici, but I won't watch it until I'm finished the series, because I've already kind of like finished my research on the Medici and have rewritten so much. But I don't want to watch the show until I'm finished, because I don't want to get anything in my head that someone else could have fictionalized. Because of course, when they do these historical TV shows, like some of it's true, some of it's like hyperbole, some of it's totally made up. So I don't want to like get something in my head that they made up for the show and then I forget and think it's real in my head. So I'm like, it's like the first thing on my to watch list when I finish this book.
Let's see. Jennifer has a question. This segues nicely into this question. Would you like your books to become movies or a TV show? Christy adds, or a TV show?
I mean, yes to either. I think they probably lend themselves better to a TV show, because there's a lot of, they're long for one, and there's a lot of plot lines. There's a lot of like cliffhangery kind of material, as people who have read the book definitely know. So I think that format would like lend itself well to TV. But I mean, if someone knocked on my door tomorrow and was like, we want to make your book movies, I would not be like, no, saving it for TV.
Let's see, Mandy asks, what would you think your elemental magic would be if you were a character in your books?
I feel like the elemental magic I would want would be earth magic, but I feel like the elemental magic I would get would be fire.
Yes.
But I do think, so I feel like one of Adele's spectral magic part of it is like me, author of fantasy fulfillment, with just wanting to be able to find my keys really easily. She has like a telekinesis. I won't give away anything else, but I feel like, oh my God, if I could just like raise my hand and my keys would fly into them, my life would be so much better.
I'd be so lazy. I'd be so lazy.
Well, I just lose them all the time, so.
Or like my motivation to hang them on the hook by my door would just go plummet. Like,
yeah, I need one of those things. Yeah. I've gotten better over the years. It used to be really bad.
I just like, I've become much more like compartmentalized. I don't know what it is. I'm not gonna say old age. But it is like everything has a place. I'm not super anal about it, but at the same time, like my keys are on that hook. Like I could leave the house now, and you can't, because you can't get back in because I'm gonna lock the door when I leave. Well,
yeah.
I think I would end up being a fire sign too, but I think I would want to be a water sign. Like I like.
I mean, that's a good magic in New Orleans to have.
It is. But all of my like zodiac signs and all that, they're all fire signs. So I feel like that's what I'd be stuck with as well. And I want to pretend that I wouldn't blow up. That I'm not a fire sign. I like to pretend I'm not that, but I am, and that's okay. It's all right. We're good. Okay, Daniel Sharman. I'm going to Google Daniel Sharman in a minute because I don't know who that is. Alice is saying that you have to watch Medici because Daniel Sharman.
Yes, I need to Google as well.
I'm going to Google that. Do you think there's a correlation between personality traits and the spectral or elemental magic, or are both of them purely genetic?
I would say hereditary versus genetic. But I do say yes to personality traits, but not necessarily in a positive correlation, you know? So it's quite spoilery. So I'll just say that, yes, I think there is a correlation between their spectral magic and their personalities, but sometimes it's subverted. So it could be like someone has a fear of X, and then their spectral magic is something that goes with that thing. So in order for them to fully realize it, they will have to overcome that fear, or at least confront that fear in some kind of way. Act like whether they want to or not. Like sometimes they're pushing themselves, sometimes they're kind of like forced to do it for like because exterior forces are making them. Good question.
Yeah, that's life. And that applies to so many things.
Hope, I do agree that the city is one of the main characters in the book. I think that was from back when we were talking about the POV.
Yeah. When you were writing the books, did you consciously think of the city as kind of a character, or just like the setting? Like you knew it was going to be set here because you're from here, whatever, or did you?
I don't think that I consciously thought about it being a character. I think that as you're writing New Orleans, like as a New Orleanian, it demands to be a character. It becomes a character. I did the brightness as the sun's going down. When I was starting to write the first book, I was in London, and there's been parts of the series that I've been in New Orleans when I was writing, and there's huge chunks of the series that I was mostly in New York writing. And the first book, and I think this goes back to something you were saying earlier, it's like, yes, there are fantasy elements in it, but at the end of the day, it really is about the aftermath of a storm and how people survive that, both emotionally and physically, I guess, and how the community kind of rallies to do that. So, and it does just kind of have that theme of like, no one can take New Orleans down, So I think at the end of the day, that really is what the first book is about. And that's why the series has so many readers that are like, I never read fantasy, or I never read paranormal, or I never read young adult books, because it is a coming of age story about a girl who, her and her father, at the opening of the first book, they're coming back from a 3-month mandatory evacuation, which pretty much everyone in New Orleans can relate to. And the city's destroyed, and it's them picking up the pieces and figuring out what to do and like what their new reality is. And where the fantasy elements come in is that because everything is unrecognizable now, when strange things start to happen, they don't notice right away because everything is so unrecognizable.
Which is so true in that time period. I moved here right after Katrina. And so sometimes, like I visited many times before, but I didn't know which things were closed because of Katrina, or which things were closed because they were closed, or which things were like, did it always look like this? Like, did it not? Like, right. Which parts I didn't know. And so, yeah, there's a lot of these types of things where you're sort of, the city is still discovering itself, rediscovering itself, and then there's a lot of things you could get away with, obviously, because you don't know what's from the storm and what's from just the city and what's from being in a big city, because I hadn't lived in a big city either. So it's just like, this is what big cities do, things like that. So yeah, a lot of things in in that first book do fly under the radar at the beginning because like it's just so much crazy is going on at this time. Who knows?
And it just gets crazier as it goes.
Well, and then you start learning, oh, this has just been this way. Oh, this has just been this way. Okay, well then right.
Well, and that is the irony for readers because you know that it's like, is it the storm? Is it that it's fantasy, or is it just New Orleans?
Right.
You know, and that's kind of like a constant question throughout the whole series, for sure.
Yeah. So Mandy has another great question, actually. There are many amazing ghost and vampire stories in New Orleans. So how do you pick which ones to use in your books?
I don't really remember, to be honest, how I picked the vampire ones. I feel like, well, the Casquette Girls one, I feel like I've told that story a million times. But I have a cousin, one of my grandpa's cousins is an Ursuline, and I was hanging out with her a bit at the time, and I was developed this fascination with the Ursulines. So I was reading a lot of academic texts about the convent and about their role in colonial New Orleans, and that kind of naturally led to the Casquette Girls urban legend. So I don't really remember how I chose the other two, but so the ghost story, okay, it's kind of the same. So Julie, the ghost story at Bottom of the Cup, that one to me also was like very obvious because I feel like that was the urban legend that I grew up with in the quarter. So that was like definitely going to be in it. And then the Romeo Catchers is just one of my favorite like urban legends that I've ever heard from the quarter. And I like things that have a very physical like evidence. So like you can go around the quarter and see the Romeo Catchers. So I like that. I like people to be able to read it and go. And they're obviously, you can go to Bottom of the Cup. You can go around, see the ghosts, the Romeo Catchers. And it's funny, there was one other ghost story from book 3 that I pulled out in one of the final drafts. And it's been so long now since I've read the book. I can't remember if it completely got pulled out or only kind of partially. But I think the legend kind of got pulled out, but I still kept the cornstalk in as a setting in one of the in one or two of the scenes. So I just like that you can walk past. I mean, you could stay there if you wanted during normal times, but you can still walk past it.
I actually found an article about what are Romeo Catchers, which I didn't know that's what they were called.
Most people didn't.
But I'm gonna post this link, and if you guys click on it and you open it and you've been to New Orleans, as soon as you see the picture, you'll be like, oh, that's what those are.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
And then every time you're in the quarter, you'll never not see them
in that very specific way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Mandy had another question. Are characters in the books that are associated with real places, like Bottom of the Cup, based on real people, or are they all completely made up?
I would say completely made up. I think that there are some experiences. So I worked at Bottom of the Cup when I was a teenager, and my mother worked at Bottom of the Cup when she was a teenager. So I feel like there are certain experiences that I had there that might pull through. Like one of them was one example was like, I think it's in book 2, where Adele answers the phone and like someone keeps calling and wants to talk to one of the psychics, and the person is hysterical on the phone. And then she's like, you can't just talk to one of the psychics, you have to book an appointment. And then one of the psychics finally comes out and grabs the phone from her when the woman like calls back the third time, and she says, "Go look under the porch." And then like 20 minutes later, the woman calls back hysterical, like, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," like profusely thanking that her cat had been missing, and like she found the cat under the porch. And so like there's stuff like that that's in it, but like the parents at bottom of the cup are not based on like real people. But that is a funny thing about the series, because there's so many things where people are like, "Oh, I know who that's based on," like wink, wink, and I'm like, okay, it's not. But like that's fine with me though, if you think it is, because you're able to put your experiences into the books, and that's great to me, you know.
Well, I think that's probably what makes your book so like you get immersed in the, not just I guess the New Orleans culture, but just like the culture of your book. Because if you're basing it on, you know, individual characters and those are real people, okay, well that seems like a little bit more difficult than like this experience. You had an experience that you've now put into your book, and that's real, and you can bring back those feelings and that moment when these things are happening and put that in your book. It doesn't matter who does it. You know, which character is having that experience. The experience is what we get absorbed into.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's working. So, well, this is not a question, but this is really awesome. I don't know if you read this comment, but I'm gonna read it. So my husband and I were staying at Hotel Villa Convento when we got engaged. I'd heard the stories for years, but he learned of the Casquette Girls the first time on that trip, and I love that one of my favorite book series is so tied to a place I saw, as I said yes over a decade ago.
Aww, that's so cute.
So, okay, Christy, I have a question for you. How did you find Alys's books? I
would love to know too.
Right? Because there's that connection, and I see that, but like, I'm assuming you did 10 years ago, you didn't get the book when you were here for that trip. So when like, how were you exposed to Alys's books? You can type in the comment. All right, Alys has a question. Do you have a favorite urban legend or ghost story about New Orleans not included in your book so far?
Oh, that's too hard. I mean, I feel like the answer has to be yes. I don't think this is going to be a very specific answer, but I do feel like there are a lot of urban legends that take place outside of the quarter and outside of New Orleans that are more like bayou folk tales and like more Louisiana-based legends that I love that are not in the books. And I would love one day to write like a more swamp town based book. So that's one reason I've never tried to conflate the two things. So that's my kind of like roundabout answer for that.
Yeah, and the culture is so incredibly different inside New Orleans and outside New Orleans. And the legends, I mean, just one piece of that. But that is really a I don't know if it's a misconception or it's just something people don't realize or think about. You know, you go to New Orleans, you come to New Orleans, you experience the city, blah, blah, blah. But then you don't even notice there's all of this going on until you actually live here a few years. Like I was here a few years before I started going, what are they wearing for Mardi Gras? Where did that picture come from? Like, what is happening there? And then you start looking and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a whole other world happening out there.
Well, I think we can blame Hollywood for a lot of that, where they just take kind of all of Louisiana and merge it together and put it in New Orleans. And then everyone thinks that that's true because they've seen it in movies and TV shows.
Yeah. There's only two Louisianas in the movies, a plantation and the city and New Orleans. Those are your only two options.
Well, and I would almost even say plantations and the French Quarter.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And it like really even like one slice of the French Quarter. You know, it's like Bourbon Street or a plantation. Arguably the most two horrible parts of Louisiana.
Yes. Like, Bourbon Street is one of those things, like, that's where if somebody comes to visit the Bourbon Street night, I'd be like, you all have fun, go, and tomorrow we'll go somewhere else. It'll be great. You just have fun with that. I know you need to check that box for yourself, and I'm all about letting you do that. But yeah, like, I lived in the Quarter for a year, and I loved it. Dude, if I could have afforded parking, I would have stayed in the Quarter. That's surprised me out of the Quarter. It's like, I had my son, and then I was like, no, I'm gonna need somewhere to park my car while I carry the baby and all these groceries back up these 4 flights of stairs. Couldn't get that, so I had to leave the Quarter. But I love it there, because people don't realize that people live there. It's a residential community for the most part, other than Bourbon Street and little strips of like the end of Royal and stuff. It's a residential community, just like anywhere else.
You're really gonna love Christy's answer to your question. And Alice, I'm so glad that you brought up Your Honor. We can talk about that after.
Oh my gosh. I haven't seen all of it. All of Your Honor. I mean, I've only seen like an episode, so.
I'm like 2 episodes behind, but I feel like no one is talking about this show, and I'm like, how is no one talking about this show? So this is not a spoiler, but I want to talk about this show in the reader group, so people need to start watching it, because so my protagonist, Adele, has like anxiety-induced asthma, and the kid in the show does. And I'm like, when he's having like this asthma attack is basically the catalyst for the entire show. And when he's having this asthma attack, all I'm thinking about is Adele. So, and I don't really think this is giving anything away, but the 2 main kids in the show, in the last episode that I watched, which is a couple of episodes behind, they go on a date to Jazzland, and I was like screaming at the TV because that is like everyone's favorite scene, like one of the favorite scenes in the whole series, like definitely in book 3, and it's actually on the cover of book 3, so it's not really a spoiler because it's on the cover.
Okay, there's a couple of things. Alice said maybe a novella for that. So after you finish the whole series, you could write a couple little novellas that pull in some of the Cajun stories.
No way. It's way too different. It has to be like its own separate thing. They already know my plan for novellas.
You've already got that. Okay. Wow. I'd read them. I'd read whatever your Cajun.
I can't describe the whole swamp and swamp culture in a novella.
Just like little bits. You gotta write them in little bits, and then you can put out like 7 books. And then once they're all out, you can read them. You got to go back. Mm-hmm. All of the readers have to go back and read them all as a collection. And when we do, the whole thing comes together.
Yeah.
No pressure. I mean, I'm
Do
sure
you like how the room has gotten very spooky now? I feel like it's very fitting because the light is not on and the sun has gone away. So I went from like totally white, angelic, sterile room to now like I'm sitting on a campfire.
It's working now. It's working. You just move it. You just gonna Your Honor, let's see. Okay. Please write a book about Julie Brown, Frenier. It's one of my favorite ghost stories. Do you know that story?
I think I do. I will have to look into that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to Google it. I'm sure like as soon as I start probably reading it about the story, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the one. That's what it is. But I don't remember the names. Okay, so Christy actually found this book at Garden District Bookshop.
See, I told you would like the answer.
Yeah. Autographed books in the vampire section, fell in love, got her mother-in-law hooked on it, devoured the book after time, was at the release party. Yes, for book 3. Asked for tickets for Christmas and we came back together. Aww. They had matching jackets with elemental symbols on them at the release party for book 3. Somewhere in your computer, there's a picture that has Christy and her mother-in-law in it.
Oh, I remember.
Like,
oh, yeah.
So there you go.
Yes. The books have an amazing fandom around them, and we have had really crazy events for each book launch. So this has been a strange launch, not being able to do that. And I mean, it is what it is, but I think people were like extra excited that there was going to be a 5th book that will hopefully be post-COVID world when it comes out, and that we can do a launch event.
Yeah, and you'll have to go all out because it's the last book. It's because you didn't get a real in-person launch party for this one. Like, yeah. I suspect another thing that I see post-COVID, when we're truly, truly post-COVID, is like everyone's next book is everyone is going to want, I want cake and I want wine and I want this and I want this and it's got to be like that. And we're going to have streamers and it's going to be a band. And it's gonna, like, because you have all these things that like you weren't able to do for this whole like year plus of book releases. And I'm actually very much looking forward to helping to plan those things for the book.
Yeah,
I really feel like everybody does, and especially like there's been debut authors this year who, you know, you spend all this time and you're just that moment's gonna happen, and then you're kind of, well, on my computer, I'm super happy about it just being on the computer though. And I'm like, I know, you're taking it really well. I can.
Book launches are already a very bizarre event because the process is very slow and very long and very arduous. So it's like this build to like when the book is coming out. And then most of the time, most authors, you know, are basically like in some city that's like not where their publisher is or their agent is or like anywhere is, and like it's basically just another day, but like now the book is out in the world rather than not being out in the world. And it's like, okay, it's not like a movie release, you know, or something where there's like millions of commercials and billboards and trailers and, you know, now like everyone knows about it. It's very low key. And especially if you're by yourself, it's just like, you know, waking up like, okay, what's up?
Why do I have so many messages on my phone today?
Yeah.
That's all. Okay. Good. Well, we'll post-COVID is going to be a lot of party planning.
Yeah.
Somebody should start learning like event planning now, like just start doing that like 8-week course, because once COVID is over, those skills are going to come in handy. You can thank me for that tip later.
Yes, everyone will be so ecstatic to have tactile experiences with other human beings.
Oh my gosh. Like I am so bad at like the elbow thing, like that you're supposed to, you know, we don't shake hands. We definitely don't hug now. We just do this elbow thing. And I'm like, I'm too close and yet still too far away from you.
Exactly. It's like, if we're so close to touch elbows, we're probably too close.
Like, can I just hug you? Or maybe I need to back up. Like, I'm out, and I'm very much looking forward to when that is no longer awkward.
Yeah, so awkward.
It's on my list of things I'm looking forward to. It's coming. Have you been like kind of super locking yourself down, or yeah?
Yes, I have been like absolute extreme quarantine. There's been periods where I've been like, oh my God, it's been 6 weeks since I've seen another human being. And I've kind of realized that that's pretty much like my limit, where I'm like, okay, I am starting to talk to the walls like now.
Yep. I other than going to the bookstore I work at the bookstore. I'm in there 3 days a week. Other than that, I pretty much I go on lots of walks. I love going out, going for walks, going to parks and stuff, and really out walking around. And we've done some driving out and, done more hiking, as much hiking as you can do in the flat, area. But yeah, doing that, I've really gotten out into nature a bit more. But other than that, just don't go. Or I find myself making lists, I will not go to a store until there's at least I have to get 10 things. I have to get this many things. Okay, I can go to this one location and I can get all these things on my list. Cool. I can go. But to go in and out, do things like that. I think that's another thing that I miss too, is the spontaneity that you didn't even notice that you had in life, where you're I'm just going to go to the coffee shop. You just go. I need to pick up this thing. I'll just go to the store, pick up that thing or whatever. And now it's okay, there's so much weight on just going to the coffee shop. Maybe I'll make my own coffee. Okay. So you have to really weigh and think about everything you do.
For sure. And I think you don't realize how much random contact with strangers is still contact, so there's a real difference between well, I didn't see any of my friends today, but I was at the coffee shop that I always go to and chatted to the barista that's there every morning, and this and this and this and this, versus just I talked to no one today unless it was on the phone.
Yeah, and that's a thing at the bookstore too, because I'm on the other side. I'm on the barista side, right? And normally I'm chatty and I want to help you and I want to help you find the best book for you and learn about your dog and your grandkids and whatever. And now I'm I really need you to go. I want to talk to you. People are please talk to me. And they want to talk to me and I want to talk to them. And both of us, I just the other day, there was a woman and we was talking, you realize you've been talking for a few minutes and both of us almost at the same time went, it was really good talking to you. And I haven't talked to somebody in a while, but I should go. I'm gonna go now because I think I shouldn't have stayed as long. I know it was great talking to you though, and and you get these even these other awkward moments because now it's oh my gosh, I've passed the whatever the time limit that is for that you're supposed to be in the same space with someone. Oh gosh. All right, we'll do this last question. Mandy just posted a question on here because we're getting close to 6, but. Do you think COVID life will influence the story of book 5 at all?
100% no. I know that this is kind of coming up a lot, I feel in the publishing world and the writing world. And I think I get it a bit more for people who write contemporary. There is more of a debate with that. Or I do think though it will influence the reading experience. And I think that of book 4 even, because there is some reference to the actual plague in the book, starting in book 3 in the historical plotline. I think, so I mean, that's a very obvious correlation, but I think that there are experiences that the characters have in the book that are not uncommon for New Orleanians going through and living in a dystopian state where the infrastructure is destroyed. There's curfews, there's militarization of everyday life. There, are rations. There are unknown, lots of unknown and waiting on the government to save people or feed people or just come up with a plan, make things better. So that is something that as New Orleanians, we are not unfamiliar with, unfortunately. But I feel for most people, at least in the US, they are very unfamiliar with all of those things. And this pandemic has created that scenario for everyone all around the world. So I think that the reading experience is different now because of COVID and because people are experiencing similar things that the characters experience for a very different reason. But no, it will not influence the plot line or make its way into the series whatsoever. And for the same reason that the storm in the book is fictional versus it being Katrina or a specific storm, because that anchors the book too firmly into a time and a reality that I don't want in the book, in the series. So
that works. That makes sense. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. And I want to say that we have signed copies of all of Lisa's books at Garden District Bookshop. And she's agreed to come and personalize them for us. So if you don't have a copy or you'd like another copy of any of her books, you can order them from our website, which I posted the link earlier in the comments, and I can do that again. And in the comments of your order, say that you'd like them personalized and who you'd like them personalized to. Or you can give us a call during regular business hours, and that's all on our Facebook page, and we'll take your order over the phone, and we will get her to come and sign and personalize them for you. So definitely take advantage of that anytime. She's local, so we can figure it out whenever. We will organize the schedule and get her to come and sign them for you. Yeah, thank you guys all for coming. Thank you for posting your comments and your questions. And Alys, thank you so much for joining me again for virtual.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. Thanks to everyone who tunes in live or to anyone who tunes in after the show. And if you do pick up the books, come join our readers group when you're done. We are having like multi-layers of spoiler discussions right now for book 4.
So be ready for spoilers if you join the group.
We try to hide the spoilers like in specific threads, but yes, you will be able to join in the insanity.
Awesome. All right. Good night, everyone.